Have you ever wondered what happens when a whole species becomes silent, not because it is weak, but because it is preparing? For 100 years, the galaxy believed humanity had accepted its own end. Before we enter the darkness of this story, take a moment to like this video, subscribe to the channel, and share it with someone who enjoys stories where humanity does not break, even when the stars turn against us. The last sound humanity made before going silent was not a scream. It was not a prayer. It was not a broken distress call, fading into space while burning cities fell below. It was a voice. A calm voice. A human voice. The final transmission came from the Sol system on the 14th of March, 2287. It lasted only a few seconds, but those few seconds would later become one of the most studied recordings in galactic history. The voice belonged to Commander Elena Roth, the last officer standing inside the last active communication station near Earth. Around her, alarms screamed. The station was losing air. The enemy was closing in. The stars outside the window were filled with enemy ships. She knew she was not going to survive. She knew Earth was burning. She knew the colonies were falling one by one. But when she opened the final channel, her voice did not shake. She said only 3 words. "We will remember." Then humanity went silent. Not for a day. Not for a year. For 100 years. The Keth Dominion was proud of what it had done. Its leaders called the attack clean. They called it necessary. They called it a lesson for every young species that grew too quickly and spoke too loudly. The Keth had studied humanity for decades before the massacre. They saw humans as dangerous, not because humans were the strongest species in the galaxy, but because humans learned too fast. They copied technology, improved it, and then found uses for it that no one else had imagined. Humans made alliances too quickly. They inspired weaker systems. They challenged old powers. They refused to lower their heads. To the Keth, that made them a threat. So the Dominion planned carefully. 17 dreadnoughts and more than 200 support ships appeared at the edge of the Sol system. They arrived at the exact moment when Earth's defense grid was partly blinded by solar storms and magnetic interference. The window was only 9 minutes long. The Keth needed less than 9. In the first 3 minutes, Earth's orbital defense platforms were destroyed. In the next 4, the deep space listening stations were taken apart with perfect precision. In the final 2 minutes, before Earth could fully understand what was happening, the Keth used a weapon they called the quieting pulse. It did not burn cities. It did not crack planets. It did not boil oceans. It did something worse. It cut every voice. Every quantum relay stopped working. Every long-distance transmitter went dark. Every colony beacon lost contact. From Mercury to the outer mining belts, from Luna to the cold stations near Pluto, every human signal was severed. The Keth called it mercy. They said they were preventing panic. But there was no mercy in what came next. After the silence began, the Keth ground fleets moved through human space like knives through cloth. They struck the colony worlds first. Proxima Station. Eden Cluster. New Carthage. The Kepler Belt settlements. The Mars habitats. The deep mining cities. The farming moons. The old research outposts. Some fought for days. Some fought for hours. Some never had the chance to fight at all. In 6 weeks, 14 billion human beings were dead. 14 billion lives. 14 billion names. Children. Workers. Pilots. Teachers. Farmers. Doctors. Engineers. Old people who had seen Earth before the first colony ships. Babies who had never seen anything except the inside of a shelter. The galaxy watched. And then the galaxy looked away. The Galactic Council met 11 days after the last human signal. Ambassadors from more than 40 species gathered beneath the great silver dome of the council hall. They spoke of tragedy. They spoke of balance. They spoke of peace. But mostly, they spoke of fear. Everyone knew the Keth dominion was powerful. Everyone knew that standing against them would mean war. Many species had their own borders to protect. Many had trade routes passing through Keth space. Many owed debts to Keth banks or depended on Keth protection. So when the motion came to intervene, the council refused. 43 votes against action. 1 vote in favor. The 1 vote came from the Vori, an old ocean species from a world called Thessera Minor. Their ambassador, Tessara who persists, rose slowly from her seat. Her body glowed with soft blue light, the way her people showed grief. She looked across the council chamber and said one sentence. "You are all making a catastrophic mistake." No one asked her to explain. No one wanted to hear it. The official record said humanity had suffered a population reduction event. It used cold words, small words, words that made murder sound like weather. The Keth expected the remaining humans to collapse. According to their models, fewer than 500 million humans were still alive. They were scattered across remote stations, hidden mining outposts, damaged colony ships, and forgotten outer settlements. The Keth believed those survivors would fight each other for supplies. They believed human governments were gone. They believed human culture would break into small, desperate groups. They believed humans would fade away in silence. For the first year, the Keth watched closely. No messages came. For the second year, they watched again. Still nothing. By the 5th year, humanity was no longer considered an active threat. By the 20th year, the Keth called them a broken people. By the 40th year, humanity was barely mentioned in military reports. By the 60th year, the Keth Senate withdrew the last watch fleet from the Sol Arm. The galaxy thought silence meant surrender. But in the dark places between the stars, where no Keth sensor was looking, humanity was not dying. Humanity was gathering. Humanity was building. Humanity was remembering. If you are already feeling the weight of this silence, give this video a like, subscribe for more deep space HFY stories, and share it with a friend who knows that humans are most dangerous when they stop talking and start working. The first secret message was sent using technology so old that the Keth did not even monitor it. A narrow beam laser. It moved at the speed of light. It required exact alignment. It was slow, limited, and almost useless by normal galactic standards. That was why it worked. The Keth watched for advanced signals. They watched for quantum relays. They watched for military broadcasts. They watched for distress calls. They never thought to watch for a thin line of light crossing the dark from one silent station to another. The first human message took 11 years to reach all its destinations. It bounced from asteroid to shipwreck, from shipwreck to mining station, from mining station to a frozen moon, from that moon to an old refugee colony almost lost in a cloud of gas. The message was short. We are gathering. Coordinates follow. Come dark. Come quiet. Come ready to wait. The coordinates led to a place called the Null Drift. Most species considered it useless. It was a region filled with thick nebula gas, magnetic storms, and sensor distortion. It had no rich planets. No major trade lanes. No easy resources. No reason for anyone powerful to care about it. That made it perfect. The first station was built inside the Null Drift from broken colony ships, stolen mining equipment, and metal stripped from dead vessels. It had no lights on the outside. It made no public transmissions. Its heat was buried deep inside its frame. Its hull absorbed scans and scattered radar. The survivors called it Cradle. Not because it was safe. Because it was where the future would be born. At first, Cradle held only a few thousand people. Soldiers without armies. Scientists without universities. Children without planets. Pilots without ships. Leaders without nations. There were arguments. There was hunger. There were losses. There were days when the air systems failed and everyone waited in silence while engineers worked with shaking hands. There were years when food was measured by the gram. But there was no surrender. Every person on Cradle understood the same truth. Humanity had lost the first war because it had been loud, open, and young. If humanity was going to survive, it had to become quiet, hidden, and patient. Over the next 30 years, more stations appeared in the dark. Cradle became the command center. Foundry became the shipyard. Lexicon became the listening station. Anamnesis became the memory vault. Prometheus became the science station. Other stations existed too, but their names were not spoken outside secure rooms. Their work was colder. Their plans were longer. Their purpose was known only to those who needed to know. Children were born in those hidden stations. They learned to walk under artificial gravity. They learned history before they learned games. They learned the names of lost cities before they learned the names of stars. They were not raised with hatred alone. That would have been too small. They were raised with memory. They learned about Earth. They learned about oceans, forests, rain, birds, and streets full of music. They learned about languages that had almost disappeared. They learned about families who had carried songs across continents and then across space. They learned that humanity was more than its pain. But they also learned what had been done. Every year, on the anniversary of the massacre, the recording was played. We will remember. The children listened. The adults listened. No one spoke afterward. No one needed to. At Station Foundry, engineers studied every piece of Keth technology they could find. During the early years, recovery teams risked everything to collect wreckage from old battlefields. They cut open dead Keth ships. They removed engines, weapons, armor plates, sensor cores, and data fragments. They learned how Keth weapons worked. Then they learned how to make them better. Humans had always been dangerous in one special way. They did not only copy. They questioned. They took a machine apart and asked why it had been built that way. Then they asked what would happen if the rules were changed. By year 50, Foundry was no longer building ships that looked human or Keth. It was building something new. The engineers called the design the Ghost Doctrine. A ghost ship was built to be almost impossible to see. Its shape scattered sensor beams in dozens of directions. Its engines were wrapped inside layers of dampening material. Its heat was swallowed and stored instead of being released into space. Its communication systems used narrow beam bursts so small and brief that even nearby sensors would miss them. From a distance, a ghost ship looked like nothing. Up close, it looked like the last mistake an enemy would ever make. The greatest weapon on those ships was not a laser. It was not a missile. It was not plasma or antimatter. It was called the null projector. The null projector did not explode on impact. It did not punch through armor in the normal way. It created a small area of dead space, a bubble where energy dropped to nothing for a fraction of a second. Inside that bubble, matter lost stability. Armor became dust. Engines tore themselves apart. Ships opened like paper in a storm. The first test was done on an empty asteroid. The asteroid vanished. The engineers watched the readings in silence. Then they ran the test again. At Station Lexicon, the work was quieter but just as deadly. Lexicon listened to the galaxy for 100 years. It listened to Keth military channels. It listened to trade messages. It listened to political speeches, supply orders, public news, private leaks, diplomatic arguments, and careless jokes spoken by officers who thought no human was alive to hear them. At first, the humans only collected data. Then they learned the Keth language. Then they learned every major Keth dialect. Then they broke the codes. By year 60, Lexicon could read Keth military messages almost as soon as they were sent. By year 80, Lexicon had hidden devices near major Keth bases. By year 90, Lexicon knew the location of nearly every Keth fleet. By year 100, Lexicon knew the names, ranks, homes, habits, and travel schedules of the officers responsible for the massacre. All of it was placed inside one document. The ledger. It contained the names of those who had ordered the attack. Those who had planned it. Those who had led the ground campaigns. Those who had destroyed cities. Those who had called it mercy. The ledger was not revenge written in anger. It was justice written with patience. The woman who guarded it was Commandant Yaradali. She was the daughter of refugees who had escaped the Sol system on one of the last colony ships. Her parents had carried almost nothing with them. A drive filled with human art and history. A set of genetic archives. And one photograph. It showed a family standing on a beach on Earth in 2281. The sun was low. The water was bright. Everyone was smiling. That beach no longer existed. The ocean had swallowed it after Earth's climate systems failed. Dolly kept a copy of the photo on her desk. Not to comfort herself. Comfort was not its purpose. It reminded her what the Keth had taken. It reminded her what the galaxy had allowed. It reminded her why silence had to last until humanity was ready. On Cradle, Admiral Sarah Voss stood before a living map of the galaxy. She was 63 years old. She had been 4 when the Keth came. She did not remember Earth with her own eyes. She remembered it through recordings, stories, songs, and the trembling voice of her grandmother describing blue skies over old cities. The map before her was 30 meters wide and filled with light. Every Keth base was marked in red. Every human station was marked in blue. Every hidden ship, every safe path, every secret supply line, every old battlefield, every listening post, every place where humanity had survived. There were more blue lights than anyone outside the null drift would have believed. Behind her stood Director Okan, the oldest living human at 117. Medical science had kept him alive, but purpose had done most of the work. He looked at the map and said, 6 years. Voss did not turn around. The Council summit will be on Thessera Minor, Okan said. The Vori have confirmed it. I know, Voss replied. The fleet will be ready. I know that too. She raised her hand and touched the place on the map where Earth waited. They thought silence was surrender, she said. Okan was quiet for a long moment. Let them think that for 6 more years, he answered. The Keth home world, Keth Prime, was a dry red planet of canyon cities and huge orbital towers. Its people were proud, disciplined, and certain of their place above others. In their schools, the war against humanity was taught as a short security action. Students were told that humans had been unstable. They were told the Dominion had prevented a larger conflict. They were told the dead were regrettable but necessary. Most young Keth had never heard the number 14 billion. Most had never heard Commander Roth's last words. Most believed humans were gone. Once every 10 years, a committee in the Keth Senate published a report on the remaining human population. By the 90th year of silence, the report was only 3 paragraphs. By the 100th year, it was 2. It recommended that humanity be reclassified as extinct or near extinct. The motion passed without debate. No one in the Senate noticed that, at that exact time, 312 human warships were moving through the darkness of the null drift toward their jump points. 312 ghost ships. No public signals. No engine flare. No wasted motion. They were crewed by men and women born in secret. People who had never lived under an open sky but had trained their whole lives for the day they would return to the light. Every ship carried the same words engraved near its command chair. We will remember. They did. Before the return begins, support the channel by hitting like, joining us through subscribe, and sharing this story with someone who believes patience can become power when humanity has a reason to endure. The Galactic Council Summit of 2387 was expected to be ordinary. Ambassadors arrived at Thessera Minor with trade disputes, border arguments, political promises, and old rivalries. The Vori had built the council hall beneath a shallow ocean. Its walls were living coral. Its ceiling glowed with soft blue light filtered through the water above. It was beautiful. It was calm. It was the perfect place for the galaxy to be reminded of what it had tried to forget. 41 ambassadors arrived over 3 days. Their ships filled the peaceful orbit of Thessera Minor. They brought guards, advisors, translators, and servants. They brought pride. They brought secrets. They brought the same quiet fear of the Keth that had shaped galactic politics for a century. The Keth delegation arrived last. That was their custom. No one complained. High Provost Dan Ethra led them. He was tall, gray-skinned, and marked with the formal symbols of the Dominion's senior military caste. He had not taken part in the massacre himself, but his career had been built on the glory of those who had. He had never apologized for 2287. He had never been asked to. He took his seat with calm confidence and waited for the summit to begin. Tessara who persists moved to the central podium. The old Vori ambassador glowed faintly beneath the water light. She had been alive during the vote 100 years earlier. She had cast the single vote to help humanity. Now she looked across the hall and spoke. Before we begin the formal agenda, there is a matter we must address. Ethra leaned forward. Something in her voice was different. It was still calm, but it no longer sounded still. It sounded like deep water before a storm. 100 years ago, Tessara said, this council voted to decline intervention after the Keth Dominion attacked human space. I cast the one dissenting vote. At the time, I said this council was making a catastrophic mistake. The hall grew uneasy. Keth delegates shifted in their seats. Tessara continued. I wish to correct that statement. She paused. It was not a mistake. It was a choice. Choices have consequences. Then she stepped back. The lights went out. Not like a failure. Like a decision. The council hall fell into darkness. Ambassadors gasped. Guards reached for weapons. Keth officers tried to activate communication devices, but every device in the hall had already stopped working. Then the ceiling came alive. The living coral above them changed color and displayed the sky over Thessera Minor. And there they were. Ships. Hundreds of them. Dark shapes in orbit. Silent, sharp, and waiting. 312 vessels had entered the system 11 hours earlier. They had arrived far beyond the normal sensor line, then moved inward under low power. The Vori had known. No one else had. Now the whole council knew. The hall erupted. Voices rose in dozens of languages. Translation systems struggled. Ambassadors demanded answers. Security teams froze because they had no idea where to point their weapons. High Provost Ethra stood slowly. He counted the ships. 100. 200. 300. More. His military training woke inside him. Those ships did not match any known design. No heat bloom. No normal drive signature. No transponder. No visible weapon ports. They looked impossible. When the lights returned, Tessara was no longer at the podium. A human woman stood there. She was not large. She wore a dark uniform with no decoration except a small blue circle on her collar. Inside the circle was a white point of light. Earth, seen from far away. Admiral Sarah Voss looked at the council. For the first time in 100 years, a human spoke in that chamber. "My name is Sarah Voss," she said. "I represent the reconstituted Human Directorate. We are not extinct. We are not residual. We are not surrendered." The chamber went silent. Voss let the words settle. 100 years ago, 14 billion human beings were murdered in a 6-week campaign carried out by the Keth Dominion. This council voted not to intervene. 43-1. Her eyes moved to the Keth delegation. "We have spent 100 years deciding what to do about that." Ethra forced himself to speak. "You have violated Galactic Council treaty space." Voss looked at him calmly. "We have fired on no one. We have threatened no civilian world. We are standing in this hall and speaking. That is more courtesy than humanity was given." "You have surrounded this planet with warships," Ethra said. "No," Voss answered. "We have revealed that we could." That answer chilled the room more than any threat could have. Ethra's mouth tightened. "What do you want?" Voss took a small data slate from her jacket and placed it on the podium. "This is the ledger." The Keth delegation became very still. "It contains the names of every Keth officer who authorized, planned, or directly carried out the assault on human space. It contains their current ranks, current positions, and current locations. It also contains the coordinates of every major Keth military installation, the deployment status of every Keth fleet, and a full analysis of the Dominion's political and economic weaknesses." She paused. We had a long time to listen. For the first time in his political life, Ethra had no immediate answer. Voss continued. "We have 3 terms. First, this council will formally recognize the events of 2287 as genocide. It will also recognize that refusing to intervene was a moral failure. Second, the Keth Dominion will return every human colony world still under occupation. It will withdraw from the Soul Arm completely. It will provide resources for 50 years to rebuild what it destroyed. Third, every person named in the ledger under command authorization or direct execution will be surrendered for trial before an international tribunal." Ethra stared at her. "You expect the Dominion to accept this?" "Yes," Voss said. "And if we refuse?" The silence after his question was heavy. Voss did not raise her voice. "If you refuse, then the galaxy will learn what 312 ghost ships armed with null projectors can do. And the Keth Dominion will spend the rest of its history wondering how many more are still hidden in the dark." A cold wave passed through the council hall. Some ambassadors looked at the ceiling again, as if expecting the human fleet to fire at any second. Voss looked directly at Ethra. "We did not come here to destroy you. We came here because we are still capable of choosing not to. But that choice has a window, High Provost. 100 years was long enough for us to learn patience." Tessara, who persists, moved from her seat. She placed both glowing hands against the coral floor. Her body shone gold and green, the old Vori sign for witnessed and affirmed. One by one, other ambassadors stood. Not all at once. Not bravely at first. But enough. Then more. The galaxy, which had once looked away from humanity, was now unable to look anywhere else. The negotiations lasted 9 days. They were broadcast across every open channel in known space. Species that had believed humanity dead watched in silence. Keth citizens watched from their homes and schools, many hearing the full story of 2287 for the first time. On the 2nd day, the council received the first sections of the ledger. On the 3rd day, Keth Military Command sent Ethra a private message. Lexicon intercepted it within minutes. The message said the human ships appeared to possess unknown weapons with catastrophic potential. Keth analysts could not confirm the full power of the null projectors without provoking a test. No one wanted to be the test. By the 4th day, the calculation had changed. The Keth were proud, but they were not suicidal. On the 6th day, the council issued its formal recognition. The document was read aloud by the senior archivist. It named the massacre. It named the Keth Dominion as the perpetrator. It named the council's refusal to act as a moral failure. It spoke of 14 billion human lives taken by force. Admiral Voss stood in the center of the hall while the words were spoken. Her face did not change. When the reading ended, Director Okan stood behind her and heard her whisper, "It is not enough." "No," he said softly. "It is not." Then Voss looked up. "But it is a start." The Keth signed the first surrender terms on the 9th day. They did not call it surrender, of course. Their diplomats used softer words. Restoration. Compliance. Stabilization. Historical correction. Humans did not care what they called it. The colony worlds were coming home. The trials were beginning. And the silence was over. When a story like this reminds you why HFY hit so hard, press like for the humans who endured, subscribe for the next journey into the stars, and share this with someone who would stand with Earth even after a century of darkness. The restoration of human space took 11 years. It was not simple. Some colony worlds had been stripped of their resources. Some had been turned into Keth military stations. Some had poisoned soil, damaged atmosphere, broken cities, and ruined oceans. Some had graves beneath every hill. Humans returned anyway. They returned with engineers, builders, farmers, doctors, teachers, soldiers, and historians. They brought machines, seeds, water purifiers, construction ships, and memory stones carved with the names of the dead. They did not rebuild everything the same way. That would have been impossible. But they kept the names. New Carthage rose again. Eden Cluster bloomed again. Proxima Station opened its docks again. Mars relit its city domes. Luna rebuilt its libraries. And Earth, wounded and changed, became the center of human life once more. Earth was the hardest. The quieting pulse had not directly damaged the planet, but the war had destroyed the systems that protected its climate. For a century, no one had been able to maintain the great orbital regulators. Oceans rose. Storms changed. Ice melted. 17 coastal cities disappeared under shallow water. Humanity rebuilt them anyway. Not always in the same places. Not always with the same stones. But with the same names. Because names mattered. Names were proof. A city could drown. A monument could fall. A map could burn. But if people carried a name forward, then something survived. The tribunal lasted 7 years. It was imperfect, as all justice after great horror is imperfect. Some humans said it was too soft. Some Keth said it was revenge. Some council members tried to hide behind legal language and procedure. But the trials happened. Of the 417 Keth officers named in the highest categories of the ledger, 301 were brought before the tribunal. 62 had died during the century of silence. 54 could not be found. Station lexicon had notes on those 54. The official record did not explain much. It only stated that not all of them appeared to have died naturally. No one asked many questions. The trials forced the galaxy to listen. Recordings were played. Orders were shown. Survivor accounts were read. Keth military logs were opened. The language of mercy was stripped away, and beneath it was the truth. The attacks had been planned. The massacres had been deliberate. The silence had been weaponized. For many Keth citizens, the trials were the first crack in the story they had been told. They saw old commanders speak without regret. They saw documents proving that human civilian centers had been targeted. They heard the number 14 billion repeated until it could no longer be avoided. Some turned away. Some grew angry. Some began to ask questions their government did not want to answer. The Dominion survived, but it changed. Not because it suddenly became good. Civilizations do not become good in a moment. It changed because, for the first time in centuries, it had been forced to face a power it could not bully, buy, or silence. Humanity did not become gentle after the return. No one expected that. The ghost fleet remained. The null projectors remained. The hidden stations remained active, though some changed purpose. Cradle became the heart of the Directorate. Foundry became a public shipyard. Prometheus opened its research to allied species. Anamnesis became the greatest human archive ever built. Lexicon was different. It was decommissioned as a military intelligence station, but it was preserved as a historical site. Its listening rooms were left exactly as they had been. Its narrow corridors, its dark control chambers, its old data walls, its silent workstations, all of it remained. Visitors walked through and saw where humanity had listened for 100 years. They saw the original copy of the ledger. They saw the photograph from Yaradali's desk. A family on a beach. A world before fire. People often stood before that photo longer than they expected. There was nothing dramatic about it. No battle. No worship. No famous leader. Just sunlight, water, and ordinary happiness. That was why it hurt. That was what the massacre had taken. Not only governments and fleets and colony worlds. It had taken ordinary mornings. It had taken birthdays, meals, jokes, lazy walks, bad songs, crowded streets, and quiet homes. It had taken life. On the 11th anniversary of the Thessera Minor Summit, a ceremony was held on Earth. It was not a grand event. No fleet passed overhead. No politicians shouted speeches into the sky. No grand lights filled orbit. Only 4,000 people attended. Most were old humans who had been children during the escape. They carried memories of ships packed too full, parents whispering in the dark, and adults trying not to cry where the young could see. The ceremony took place where New York had once stood. The old city was gone beneath the water. A new platform had been built above it. At its center stood a black stone column 200 meters tall. From its base to its highest point, it was engraved with names. 14 billion names. It had taken 40 years to complete. At the base, one line was carved in English. We will remember, and we did. Admiral Sarah Voss stood before the monument in silence. She had commanded fleets. She had faced the council. She had stared down the Keth Dominion. She had carried the weight of the dead since childhood. But before that stone, she cried. Only for a short time. Only quietly. Her officers saw and looked away, because some moments deserve privacy even when they happen in public. For 100 years, human grief had been used like fuel. It had been turned into ships, weapons, plans, training, archives, and discipline. It had been shaped into purpose because survival demanded it. Now, for the first time, grief could simply be grief. Voss allowed herself 30 seconds. Then she wiped her eyes, turned to her officers, and said, "We have work to do." And they did. Because victory was not the end. Rebuilding was harder than revenge. Revenge needed focus. Rebuilding needed patience, mercy, argument, skill, food, law, schools, roads, clean water, and people willing to plant trees they would never sit under. Director Okan lived longer than anyone expected. By the time he was 128, even he seemed surprised by it. After the summit, he stopped working in command rooms and began teaching children. Not military strategy. Not the science of ghost ships. Not the politics of the council. He taught small history. He taught what people ate in old cities. He taught games children played before space travel. He taught songs from Earth languages that had almost vanished. He taught jokes that no longer made sense unless he explained 5 things first. He taught stories about rain, markets, crowded trains, family kitchens, and people arguing about sports no one played anymore. Some children found it strange. Some loved it. All of them needed it. They had inherited survival, but Okan wanted them to inherit life. One day, a girl of 10 asked him a question after class. Why were we quiet for so long? Why did humans not fight back right away? Okan treated the question with care. Because if we had fought right away, we would have fought from anger, he said. Is anger bad? The girl asked. No, Okan said. Anger can keep you alive for one more day. But it burns hot and fast. Then it leaves you empty. Then what did we fight from? Okan looked through the window at a pale blue sky over a rebuilt city. Something colder, he said. Something that does not run out. What is it called? Okan thought of Commander Roth and her final words. He thought of Cradle in the Dark. He thought of Sarah Voss touching Earth on a map of stars. He thought of Yara Dali's photograph. He thought of names carved into black stone. Memory, he said. The girl thought about that. Then she nodded, as if she understood more than a child should. 300 years after the massacre, a young Keth historian named Sarah published a paper that caused great anger inside the Dominion. The title was simple. The Strategic Miscalculation of 2287. In it, Sarah argued that the Keth had not lost because their weapons were weak. They had not lost because their fleets were badly placed. They had not lost because their intelligence failed in a normal way. They lost because they misunderstood what silence meant. The Keth believed that if a species stopped speaking, it had stopped resisting. They believed fear and grief would make humans smaller. They believed time would erase pain. They believed a people cut off from the galaxy would forget itself. They were wrong. Human silence had not been emptiness. It had been pressure. It had been discipline. It had been a held breath before action. Sarah's conclusion became famous across the galaxy. The Dominion believed the loss of voice meant the loss of will. It did not understand that, in humans, silence could become power in its most focused form. We mistook the held breath for the last breath. We should have known the difference. The paper was taught in military academies, political schools, and history programs across many worlds. In the margins of copied versions, students from many species wrote the same sentence again and again. They always came back. And that became the lesson. Not that humans were unbeatable. Not that humans were always noble. Not that humans did not feel fear, pain, anger, or doubt. The lesson was simpler. Humanity remembered. When others forgot, humanity remembered. When the council looked away, humanity remembered. When the Keth grew comfortable, humanity remembered. When the stars went quiet, humanity remembered. For 100 years, the galaxy mistook silence for surrender. But surrender is empty. Human silence was full. Full of names. Full of plans. Full of grief. Full of ships being built in darkness. Full of children learning about a blue planet they had never seen. Full of old songs played softly in hidden stations. Full of engineers improving stolen technology. Full of spies listening to every careless enemy word. Full of soldiers training without applause. Full of a promise made by a dying woman in a failing station. We will remember. The galaxy heard those words too late. The Keth understood them too late. The Council respected them too late. But humanity had never needed the galaxy to understand. It only needed time. And when the time came, humanity returned without shouting, without begging, without asking permission to exist. It returned with proof. It returned with memory. It returned with a fleet no one had seen coming. It returned with the dead behind it and the future ahead of it. That is why, in the centuries that followed, every council chamber kept one empty human seat near the front, even when the human ambassador was present. The empty seat was not for politics. It was not for ceremony alone. It was for the silence. The silence that had lasted 100 years. The silence that had fooled a galaxy. The silence that had carried 14 billion names through darkness. And whenever young diplomats asked why the seat stayed empty, their teachers gave the same answer. Because once, the galaxy forgot what humans were. And the humans did not. So the next time the stars fall quiet, the next time a human fleet disappears from every sensor, the next time Earth stops answering, do not celebrate too early. Do not call it weakness. Do not call it surrender. Listen carefully. Because somewhere in the dark, humanity may only be holding its breath. And when humanity breathes again, humanity does not always answer immediately. But humanity always remembers.